I want to get more people of color into the PhD program, and I want to help them get out. I said, that's my goal. That's why I'm coming here. And they vowed to support me, and they have. And so that's why I'm at Iowa. And I'm very proud to say that, we've had a minimum of one, but as many as 5 or 6 at a time in our program, people of color in the PhD program. And I've been very fortunate to be able to work with most of them and help them get in and help them get out.
Welcome to Show Your Receipts, where we believe if you can see it, you can be it. Receipts are evidence or proof that something has occurred. Our guests are evidence that Black excellence is alive and well. They will be sharing their receipts on how they've been able to accomplish so much in their life. I'm your host, Tony Jackson. Let's get started. Welcome to Show Your Receipts, where we believe if you can see it, you can be it. I am super excited to introduce my guest today. Miss Venise Berry is a professor in journalism and African American studies at the University of Iowa in Iowa City. She received a BA degree in journalism and a master's degree in communication studies from the University of Iowa. Her PhD was awarded in 1989 in radio, TV, and film at the University of Texas in Austin. She serves on the faculty each winter in the Solstice Low Residency Creative Writing Program at LaSalle University in Newton, Massachusetts, and offers writing workshops most summers in the Iowa Summer Writing Festival. Ms. Berry's research explores African Americans, media, and popular culture. Her latest book, published in 2020 by Peter Lang, is Racialism and the Media: Black Jesus, Black Twitter, and the First Black American President. It is an examination of mediated images and messages concerning African American culture. Ms. Berry is also the co-editor of an anthology with Peter Lang, Black Culture and Experience, Contemporary Issues 2015. She co-authored 2 nonfiction books on Black film with her brother, S. Toriano Berry, a retired associate professor in film at Howard University, The Historical Dictionary of African American Cinema, Scarecrow Press 2007, and the 50 Most Influential Black Films, Citadel 2001. On her creative side, she is also the author of 3 national best-selling novels: So Good, An African American Love Story, All of Me, A Voluptuous Tale, and Colored Sugar Water. Ms. Berry is currently seeking an agent for a 4th novel, Pockets of Sanity, and we have her here today. Welcome to the podcast, Ms. Berry.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Professor Berry, I am excited to talk to you. You are the first true academic we've had on this podcast, and so I'm excited to be able to pick your brain and hear your story. But let's jump right into it. It's been said, Ms. Berry, that money earned is a representation of problems solved. Talk to me about the problems that you solve as a professor at the University of Iowa.
It's interesting because I taught for 12 years at historically Black colleges in Texas. So I taught at Texas Southern for 5 years, and I taught at a smaller Black college called Houston-Tillotson for 7 years. And it's interesting because when I made the decision to come to the University of Iowa, because I got my degrees here at my BA and my MA at the University of Iowa. When I made my decision to leave Black colleges and come back to the University of Iowa, it was really purposeful. One of the things that I noticed after I finished my PhD and started interviewing was that everywhere I went, all the universities I went and did interviews with, they all kept saying, we'd love to hire one, but we can't find them. They're not out there. And so I would ask them, I'd say, well, how many are in your graduate program? Of course, they're talking about people of color. They'd love to hire a professor of color. And so I'd say, well, how many are in your graduate program? 0, usually. Maybe 1, very rarely 2. And I'd say, well, if you're not making PhDs of color become professors, what do you expect to happen? How are you going to find them? How are you going to get them? So one of the things, I was talking to my mother after one of my interviews, and I was very, very disappointed. And I said, I really wish I could clone myself. And she said, you can. And that's what we started talking about, was I could come to some place like Iowa, and where they had a PhD program, because the Black colleges that I was at didn't, in journalism, which is my area. and I could, really look at making more PhDs of color. So when I interviewed at Iowa, I was very clear with them. I said, this is why I'm coming. I want to get more people of color into the PhD program, and I want to help them get out. I said, that's my goal. That's why I'm coming here. And they vowed to support me, and they have. And so that's why I'm at Iowa. And I'm very proud to say that, we've had a minimum of one, but as many as 5 or 6 at a time in our program, people of color in the PhD program. And I've been very fortunate to be able to work with most of them and help them get in and help them get out.
That is amazing. So you went to Iowa on a mission to clone some more PhDs.
Yes.
To by default create more Black professors.
Absolutely. I am the only African American professor in journalism, and I have been the only African American professor for 30 years, except for 3 years where we brought in another African American woman, but she didn't stay. That's it. I'm talking about domestic too. That's the other thing. Sometimes they want to claim international students. I'm like, no. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about students of color who are domestic, who are national, Latino, African American, Asian American, though Native American. I want people who are from the United States in our PhD program.
So in your personal opinion, what's the holdup? What's the roadblock from preventing there from being more numbers of people specifically in that program at the University of Iowa? Is it just that it's not enough people who are interested in journalism or going down that path from our community, or what do you think it is?
I think it's a combination of things. One of the problems, of course, is that, our students don't, just what you said, they don't have access to understanding all the different options that are out there. The other thing is a lot of our students get turned off by education. And so to have to, it's one thing to go to high school 12 years, then you got to go to undergrad for 4 years, then you get a master's for another 2 years, and then you're doing another 4 to 6 years at a PhD. And a lot of students are like, I don't want to do that much education. They just don't want to do it. So you have to identify those students who understand education and are good at it and enjoy it, and try to encourage them, which is one of the things I do, try to encourage them to think about this as a potential career field in the future. And I think that, a lot of students are open to it once they get into the university and they're thinking about, what do I want to do? But the problem is getting them here, getting them thinking about it. Even as undergrads, you got to get them open to thinking about going on for a master's, going on for a PhD.
Absolutely. One of the entrepreneurs that I follow in banking, he talked about how oftentimes banking can be discriminatory because to be able to get some of the best banking jobs, you oftentimes have to do unpaid internships. And oftentimes people from our communities, we don't have the luxury of doing unpaid internships because we have to go and do things to earn income. Do you see some kind of connection with that in somebody continually increasing their education and going back for a master's and going back for a PhD? Is it a holdup where some people are like, I got to go and make money. I got to go and start my career. And I don't have the luxury of spending another 2, 4, 5 years in a program where I could go right now and go make money. What are your thoughts?
That could be a part of it. I mean, I imagine that's a part of it for some students. They go out but it's other students. And one of the things we love doing in journalism is let them go out into the field, let them do several years in journalism, and then come back, get some experience out there in journalism as a newscaster or doing some kind of media experience, and then come on back, 5, 6, 7, 10 years later and get your master's and PhD and teach. So it doesn't have to be, like one right after another. We try to encourage them to use all the opportunities they can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if a person is considering wanting to be a professor, can you share with us what a normal day in a life is for you? Is it are you grading papers? I don't know. Are you just giving lectures, writing lectures? Do you create one lecture and just do that over and over again, years after year after year? What does a normal day look like for you?
Well, it's all of that, really. Basically, the nice thing, this is what I tell all of my graduate students, the nice thing about being a college professor. When I went out, I did work in radio news for about 7 years. And I decided I didn't like the real world because radio news, they didn't get the kinds of time off and vacations and that kind of thing that you get in education. As a matter of fact, during the holidays, radio is still on, television is still on, so you don't get the kind of rest and relaxation. But when I was in school, I was like, hey, you get a month off for Christmas and you get spring break and Thanksgiving break and the summer. It's kind of like, oh, I like that lifestyle better. So that's one of the reasons I ended up going back to get my PhD, because I wasn't planning originally to get a PhD. I was going to work in the field. I thought I would be a producer for some kind of television news show. And after I worked for 7 years in the industry and realized that, it really wasn't thrilling to me, I decided I'd go back and get my degree and teach. And the nice thing about teaching is, well, I'm at what's called a Research One institution. And so a Research One institution, they expect you to publish. There are colleges that just want you to teach. They don't worry about publications. But this one wants you to publish. And so I teach fewer classes. I only teach 2 classes each semester. And the other time that I'm expected to be working is to be writing. And that's why just to some of the books I've written, creative and fiction and nonfiction, because that's what I'm supposed to do. And so I tell my graduate students all the time, I said, what other job is going to pay you to develop and promote you? I mean, right. If you create a project for IBM or one of the other kind of, Google or somebody, that's there. They maintain control. If I create a book it's mine. It'll say I'm a professor at the University of Iowa, but it's my, work. And so I really love that aspect of it as well, in the sense that I love having the breaks. And I shouldn't make it sound like I can just go off and do nothing during the breaks. I mean, I have to admit, during Thanksgiving break, summers, Christmas, we're usually writing. We take some time off, but we're writing. So it's not that tension. That tension is not there like it is on a 9 to 5 where you got to go in, you got to perform. But, a lot of our time, we're spent when we're not teaching, we're writing. And the nice thing about that is, again, it's usually a topic that I'm interested in. It's based on my research, or when it comes to my fictional novels, it's based on a topic of interest for me. And so I enjoy the writing.
Absolutely. I feel like you just touched on a point that a lot of people don't talk about. I always ask people questions about the concept of work-life balance. That's something that people discuss a lot. And I think many people may not know, obviously it's hard work to become a professor. So it's definitely not like something that, a person should pursue specifically for lifestyle, because it's a lot of effort and work even just to get there. With the idea that you have that level of autonomy, and the way you described it, you're basically employed, but you have a university who is encouraging you to do your own thing in a lot of ways. They're encouraging you to express your own personal creativity, and you'll own that whole work all on your own. That's a huge point, because most times when you work for a place, your intellectual property becomes the ownership of that company. Was that one of your motivating factors to wanting to become a professor?
No.
Did you know you wanted to write before you became a professor?
Nope.
Oh, wow.
I thought I was going to teach. That's why I was teaching at historically Black colleges. I thought I was just going to teach until, like I said, I just kept having people tell me they couldn't find PhDs of color. And I was like, well, this is crazy. You got to make them. And so that's how I ended up at Iowa. And then Iowa had, I didn't really know the details of a Research One institution until I got to Iowa. And so once I got to Iowa, I was like, okay, well, I have to develop a research project. I had done a dissertation, so I knew how to do research, but I have to come up with kind of a research area and figure out what I was going to do. I mean, I actually published 2 or 3 articles out of my dissertation in certain journals. And then I got to the point where I just started looking at books. With matter of fact, the interesting thing about my fictional novel, I've really been very lucky. I mean, very blessed in my career, because I did not plan on writing fictional novels either. I just did not make that. That wasn't a plan of mine. And while I was in school working on my PhD, I took this script writing class, and for some reason, I just took it just on a humbug because I felt like I wanted to. And I wrote this screenplay about these 3 Black women who were all looking for love in the class. That was my project for the class. So after I finished the class and finished my dissertation and everything, I kind of threw it up in the closet and didn't think any more about it until I read Terry McMillan's, not Waiting to Exhale, but her first book. And for the life of me, the first book is not coming in my head, but I'll think of it in a minute. But it's the book about this couple that they made it into a movie as well. And I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, I read that book and I loved that book. I thought that book was so awesome. And I said, my script would make a really good book. So I just started playing around with it on the weekends and in the evenings, just kind of building out scenes and developing chapters and, kind of trying to describe my characters and create certain situations and stuff. And I had a friend that knew that I had wrote this novel. I ended up writing it. It ended up being a manuscript, but it hadn't been published. And I had a friend who knew I had written it. And so after Terry McMillan's Waiting to Exhale blew up, all the people in the industry, in the publishing industry, every publisher was looking for their Terry McMillan. They wanted a Black man about love and all of that stuff. And so a friend of mine who knew about my writing called me and said, look, she had another friend who was starting up as an agent, who was starting an agency, and she was looking for people. She said, I thought about your book and I thought about you, and I think you should, contact her. And I've also told her about you. So I did. I contacted her and we talked about the manuscript, and I told her, I said, well, it's been, 3 or 4 years since I looked at that thing. So give me a few months to kind of go over it and kind of tighten it up and clean it up and make sure it's okay. And then I'll send it to you. And so I did. I sent it to her after I got it cleaned up. And at first she said, well, it's not quite ready. And she didn't really know what, she couldn't tell me what to change, because I was like, well, I don't know what else you want me to do to it.
Yeah.
And so at the time I was trying to lose some weight. And so I had started walking 4 times a week at the field house, which is a place at the university on the track. And I always walked in the evenings, but this particular week I had to go Friday morning. Well, something woke me up about 7 a.m. on Friday morning and said, get up and go walk, because I was going out of town that weekend. I wouldn't be able to get my 4 days in. Well, I'm not a morning person. That people who know me know that mornings are not my thing. And so I ignored it for a while. And then I finally got up and I went over. So I'm walking around the track and it's just me and this older white man on the track. And we're walking and finally he catches up with me and he says, I got my headphones on because I'm listening to my music, trying to get my hour of walking in. And he says something to me and I take out my headphones and say, what? And he says, does this stuff really work? And he's all chipper. And I always make this joke and say, I don't like mornings and I don't like morning people. So anyway, he immediately rubbed me the wrong way. So I said, well, they say it does, so I'm giving it a try. And I got ready to put my headphone back on and he started talking real quick. So I was ignoring him for a while. And then finally I heard writer. I heard him say the word writer. Come to find out that he was a writer in the Iowa, or he had been in the Iowa Writers Workshop. And he said, God sent me to him. And I kind of like, what? So then he said he didn't know anybody who was African-American and that he had just finished a manuscript. The main character was a Black man and it was set in Chicago. It was a Black doctor in Chicago who was basically, it's called Good Samaritan. And what happens is this Black doctor sees an accident, goes and tries to help the couple. He gets the man out, but he can't get the woman out, and she ends up dying. And so the man sues him and basically tries to ruin him. And there's the basic premise of the book is that there was no Good Samaritan law in Illinois. Okay, so he wanted me to read the manuscript. He wanted African American to read the manuscript so it didn't sound like an old white Jewish guy writing for a black doctor, writing all this stuff of a black doctor. And I told him about the agent who said something was wrong with my manuscript, but she didn't know how to fix it. So we exchanged manuscripts. And I read his and he read mine, and I made most of his changes were structural, and I made the changes and stuff and sent it back to her. She said, "Okay, let's go with it." And so his book got published, and so did mine. So
wow!
And the funny thing is, I've never been walking in the morning since then. Before then,
wow. So Jesus woke you up in the morning and said, "Go walk this morning. I know you don't like to get up in the morning."
Absolutely.
Sent a random white man to give you the information you needed. That sounds like a book right there. That sounds like a story right there.
That's what I said. I mean, I really have been blessed. That's how I got into the industry in fiction, is on the, riding on the coattails of Terry McMillan and, having him help me structure that book.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because it seemed like that was kind of a pleasant surprise. What are some other things that people may not know about being a professor, or some things that may be misunderstood about being a professor that you can maybe share with us? Because, a lot of people, again, I didn't know that a lot of professors have a requirement to write books, which it seems like a pretty cool requirement. I'm thinking like maybe like textbooks or some boring thing, but you guys, you're writing actually interesting novels. What are some other things that people may not know about being a professor?
Well, and I should say that what I'm doing is unique to Iowa. The University of Iowa calls itself the Writing University, and our Iowa Writers Workshop is like top, like at the top. And so they accept fiction. In another university, I may not have been able to claim my novels as part of my publication, but at Iowa, I was allowed to include that when I went up for my tenure decision, when I went up for full professor, et cetera. And so Iowa really is unique and distinct in that way. And so I should say that because you may not be able to do that in other settings, because I came in on a research track. And I have done research. Like I said, my book on racialism in the media is my research book that is based on 25 years of research of African-American images and messages in the media. And so, but yeah, I did not really think about how, I guess the thing that's interesting is, it sounds great to be able to write books, but people, again, that's another thing that a lot of our young people have difficulties writing. A lot of them don't like to write. And so one of the things I do is try to encourage, students to write more, to really focus on their writing, because it's one thing to write a 10-page paper, but when you got to write a 300-page book, that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
That's not something that just pops out.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this: the skill set of writing, is that something that you feel like anybody can learn, or is that a gift? Is that a gift that you have, or is that something that you just kind of, work hard, and you develop that gift, or is it a combination of the two? I guess the question I'm asking is, do you believe that anybody could be a writer?
Absolutely. And the reason why I say that is because think about the range of writers out there. And I have a workshop that I teach that it's called Clarity and Depth. And it looks at the range of someone like a Danielle Steele versus a Toni Morrison. And Danielle Steele is very basic. Her writing is, the dog walked down the street, the dog, cat, the dog chased the cat. Whereas Toni Morrison, her writing is so deep and so explicit, and so I tell my students all the time in my writing classes, I mean, look at the range of writers out there and just decide where you want to fit in or where you think you fit in, and that's who you are. I mean, you can do it in a variety of different ways. You don't have to do it like me. You don't have to do it like Toni Morrison or even Danielle Steele, but just kind of look around and see where you fit, because from the basics all the way to the deepest writing is available.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we're going to kind of change courses here because I want to kind of dig more into you and your story. First question I have for you is, what do I need to know about you, Miss Berry, in your early childhood years to understand who you are and the woman you are today?
Um, I guess one of the things that immediately pops into mind is that I call myself a television child. I was born in 1955, and television came in around 1957.
Mm.
And so growing up, I loved the television. I just thought it was fascinating that you could look at the screen and there was these people and they were talking and moving and all this stuff. I just thought television was just the most fascinating thing. So I knew from a very young age I wanted to do something that dealt with television. Now I kind of went around and about and ended up not doing television in that way, but I knew that that was something that really interested me. And and I also feel like I enjoyed writing. I was a young person that enjoyed writing. I used to write letters to a lot of my aunts and uncles and my elderly grandparents. I would write them a letter like once a month. I'd write my grandmother a letter and say, "Hey, how you doing?" Da, 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 you know. And so I like to write. Writing was something that was really important and fun to me. And that made a difference in my experience in my educational situations. Now, growing up in the 50s and 60s, of course, I was, one of those baby boomers that was dealing with civil rights and stuff. And I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, where it wasn't as obvious, but it was still there, the segregation and racism and all that kind of thing. And as a matter of fact, in my I think it was my 10th year. Yeah, it was the 10th year of high school. They took 50. I was in this it wasn't predominantly, but the large number of African Americans in Des Moines went to this school, Irving Junior High. And they took 50 of the best Black students out of Irving and moved us to this white high school away as part of the desegregation effort. And so that was when I really started experiencing, elements of or seeing elements of racism and some of the real negative stuff because, the kids didn't want us there and they called us names and there were fights every day and it was just crazy. I had, teachers who were racist and matter of fact, I had this one teacher who it didn't matter what I wrote, I could never get an A in her class. Give me an A. And then finally, there was this one little white girl who sat next to me because I was really upset about it because I knew I was writing. I knew I could write,
Yeah.
And so I was, and she and I talked, this little white girl, she and I talked, she was cool. And she said, well, I tell you what we're going to do. She said, the next time for the next paper, I'm going to put your cover sheet on mine and you put my cover sheet on yours and we'll see what she does. And sure enough, hers got an A, which was my paper. And mine got a B, or no, I should say, yeah, mine got a B, which was my, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, so then, of course, then we had the power. I told my mother, and my mother went up there and had a fit and had me moved out of her class and all that kind of stuff. But it was really interesting just to see just the kind of, just the it wasn't I don't really know. I did see hatred. I don't know if I actually experienced the hatred that some white people have for Black people, but I saw it. There was some, like I said, some fights and some other kinds of issues that were really, really ugly.
And so this was Iowa late 60s when you started high school. 68, 69, somewhere around there when you started high school. So
yeah, this was probably 69.
69. So Dr. King had just been assassinated. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy had just been assassinated.
Yep.
So it was a tumultuous time. And that's when you started your high school years in Iowa.
Yeah. And we used to have to ride the bus. I mean, a lot of it was unfair. Desegregation was so unfair because the Black kids, we had to get up an extra hour early because we had to get on a bus and we had to go out further to go to the white school. And it was really a pain. But, on one level, it helped us to better understand the environment that we were in and the people that we needed to deal with. And don't get me wrong, there were some good, good white people at the school as well. Like I said, like the young lady who sat next to me. But at the same time, we really got a better understanding of, who these folks were and how they felt and what were some of the issues and things that we needed to pay attention to and to deal with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In your household, what role did education play? Did you have parents who were very, very strict on education, like you're definitely going to college, this is the path you're going? Were they a little bit more relaxed? What was their thought process?
Well, my mother was very adamant about us going to college. She definitely was. My father, he just went along, with her. But one of the things she talks about is the fact that he had dropped out of high school, and then he went back. Like 2 or 3 years later, he was in his 20s when he went back and finished high school. And she was talking about how his family, nobody in his family went to his graduation, which she thought was really awful because his family wasn't really into education. But she had gotten pregnant at 16 with me and married daddy. So she didn't finish high school. So she ended up going and getting a GED, and then she went and got a BA at Drake University.
Wow.
And she just was adamant that, nobody can take your education away. They can take away a house, they can take away a car, but they can't take away education. And so she wanted us to do that. Now, I was also very adamant about my child going to college, but my child decided she didn't want to. She went for a year up at Columbia College in Chicago, and then just didn't really think it was for her and dropped out. So so I don't know if parents can really push a child into it. It has to be something that the parents want and something that you want. Because once she decided she didn't want it, there was nothing I could do to, force her.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you were in high school, did you always know you wanted to go to University of Iowa? And what was your experience like once you got to, once you went from Des Moines to Iowa City?
Well, I did know that I wanted to get away. I wanted to be more independent from my parents. I loved them, but I did want to be more independent. And so I wanted to make sure I went to a college that was far enough away where I was on my own, but close enough so that I could have some support and some access to them. Actually, the sad thing is it's not there anymore. There used to be a 1-week journalism workshop at Iowa for African-American students. And African-American students from all across the state would come. There's maybe about 20 of us, maybe. And we spent 1 week at the university learning, elements of journalism and doing, hanging out and doing all kinds of, workshops and other kinds of seminars and things. And it was so awesome that was what really kind of committed me to saying, I want to do journalism and I want to do Iowa. They do something now, but of course it can't be focused on Black people. It's a broader range of folks and stuff. And so it's not the same because it was something about the 20 of us Black folks being together. And I think probably a large number of us ended up coming to Iowa because of
So you
that.
feel like it was that workshop that made the light click on for you that you wanted to do journalism?
Well, I knew I wanted to be in the media, remember television, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So when I took those workshops that talked about writing for newspapers and writing for, TV and all that kind of stuff, it was exciting to me. And I said, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to do journalism. So I decided I would, go to Iowa and I would do journalism. And I also had several friends who they weren't in journalism, but there were several people that I went to high school with, who we all were friends and we went there together. There was like 4 or 5 of us that all went to Iowa and we all, knew each other. And so that was helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I remember my experience going to Iowa. I'm from Ypsilanti, Michigan. It's kind of Metro Detroit area. And, the high school I went to was, pretty mixed, but also predominantly Black. I played on, all the sports teams I played on, basketball, football, track, predominantly Black. all my coaches Black. So that was kind of my norm. And I remember going to Iowa when I first got there, obviously being around the football team, a lot of Black people. But I remember my freshman year, whether it was me, navigating around campus or in dorms, oftentimes feeling like I wasn't like I didn't belong sometimes. I felt I could feel my differentness everywhere I went. As a matter of fact, I had an experience. I stayed in Slater Hall my freshman year, and I remember, Slater Hall, it's a co-ed dorm, and I remember my roommate and I talking to this girl from Iowa. Now, we're 18 years old, so I'm assuming she's 18. We're all 17, 18 years old. And she told us we're the first Black person that she's ever talked to in real life. And it just kind of woke me up like, where am I at? What am I doing here? So, talk to me about your experience. Obviously, you kind of had a different experience because you were born and raised in Iowa. But talk to me about your experience as being this Black woman on Iowa campus in the early, late 60s, early 1970s. What was that like for you?
Well, now I wasn't born and raised. I was raised, but not born. I was born in Kansas City, and my family moved to Des Moines when I was about 5. So I was raised here. But the interesting thing about Iowa for me was during that period, again, we were really close. I mean, a lot of the Black students, we were close, and we had the Afro House, and we hung out in the Afro House, and we used to get together and play bid whist. And I mean, we made our own fun. We made our own. We got together, and because we had the same feeling that we didn't really belong. We were there, and people tolerated us, but we didn't really belong. So what we did was kind of we surrounded each other and just made sure that we were all in a situation where we were, we could be comfortable and that we could help each other and support each other. And we had a lot of fun. I mean, it was just, I tease my students now all the time, because if somebody's not having a party, or if the downtown is closed and they can't go to a bar, they don't know what to do with themselves. I mean, we never had that problem. We always figured out, we go play some cards, or we go hang out and do something else. We were just, so much more inventive and imaginative than these students are today. But I will say that one of the interesting things about Iowa is, even now, as an African-American professor, I have students who've never had an African-American professor. Wow. Over the years, I've had a lot of students who, and that's one of the reasons why I actually stayed at Iowa, because not only was I trying to create more PhDs, Black PhDs and other students of color, but I realized that not only did the African-American students who are here need me, but the white students who are here needed to see me. They needed to know me. They needed to understand that I am the same as any other professor on this campus. I just the color of my skin might be a little different. And so I just think it's really important. I just felt like it was really important for me to show who I am and how important it is for me to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when you got to Iowa, your initial major was journalism. Is it a foregone conclusion when a person majors in journalism that they're also going to go and get a master's degree? And if not, what caused you to continue your education after getting your bachelor's degree and say, you know what, I'm signing up for another few more years?
That's a funny question, because when I finished, I went back home to Des Moines. I was staying with my parents, working in some PR firm, and I was miserable. And my father wanted to treat me like I was back in high school, and I had been, I had spent 4 years hanging and swinging and coming and going the way I wanted to. And so finally one day he and I got into it, and I was like, okay, this ain't gonna work. So one of my professors had asked me before I left, they said, well, have you ever considered a master's? And I was like, I don't want to go back to school. I want to stay in school. I'm sick of school. Shoot, when me and my father got into it, I called that professor and said, look, when can you get me back in there? I'm coming back. And that was, I graduated in May, went the summer and the fall in Des Moines. By January, that spring semester, he had me back in school and I was moving back to Iowa City to get my master's degree. So it wasn't,
Absolutely.
again, it wasn't a plan. It was just, it was a means to an end.
Mm, So, and that's an interesting point that you make. It seems like a big part of your story is basically, you not necessarily laying out all of the steps of the process, but you just taking it one step at a time, and then you look back. It looks planned. It looks like you planned it all out. Talk to me about that because, even still, I battle this today, and I know a lot of young people battle this where they feel like they have to have everything lined up and, they have to have all of these ducks in a row, and it's going to be step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. Talk to me about some of the serendipity and the randomness like decisions that come about.
Well, the interesting thing is just to keep an open mind. To me, that's one of the things that I've been very lucky. I'm very open and I pay attention to options and opportunities. When I was teaching at Texas Southern, a guy came to talk to our undergraduates about going and getting a master's at University of Texas at Austin. And me and another faculty member there who had our masters but were thinking about PhDs pulled him to the side afterwards and asked him about the PhD program. And I hadn't decided I wanted to get a PhD at the time, but we just said, well, what's the PhD like? And da-da-da. And so he gave us some information and stuff and kept in touch with us. And I ended up going there. But, it's just, he wasn't there for us. He was there for the undergrads, but that was, an opportunity that, I saw. Same thing with the novel, again, I didn't write a novel because, I need to write a novel. I wrote a novel because, that screenplay might make a nice novel. And I just was kind of playing around and da-da-da. So again, just looking at what are some of the options out there and taking advantage, paying attention when things come to you, like even getting up at 7:00 in the morning, because Lord knows I rolled over several times, not wanting to get up and go walk. And finally I said, okay. I got up and went and walked, and sure enough, met the gentleman and got my book published. So you just have to kind of keep an open mind and pay attention, listen, talk to people, listen to people. You never know when somebody's going to give you a nugget, something that works. Even when the professor asked me, he said, have you considered a master's degree? I was like, heck no. But that was in the back of my mind. That's an option. And so when I needed to get away, or at least I felt like I wanted to get away, I said, hey, let me call and see what the possibilities are here. So that's what I think young people really have to do. Don't worry about planning everything out, but just as you're moving through, your life, just pay attention, listen, keep your eyes open, because you never know what possibilities are out there, what kinds of, options. You may have never thought about doing X, Y, or Z, and then all of a sudden X, Y, or Z shows up and you're like, okay, maybe I'll try that. That's the other thing, is trying something. To me, there's no harm in trying something, even if you fail. I'll try it in a minute. I'll say, okay, let me give this a try. Oh, ice skating. Can't ice skate worth a darn, but I tried it one time.
Yeah.
Can't ski, but I tried it. So I mean, just thinking about trying something, and so a lot of times people are so close-minded. It's got to be this, or I got to have that, and that's not necessary, because your life could take on a whole different. One of the things my father used to say is, it would be really depressing to have to get up every day and go to a job that you hate. How depressing is that? So you really want to try to pay attention so that you end up in a job that you really enjoy, that you care about. I once knew this doctor who didn't like sick people.
What?
He decided to be a doctor because of the status, because he could say he was a doctor, but he was miserable. He was miserable in his career. That doesn't make sense to me.
Right. And actually piggyback on something that you just mentioned in regards to, the initial professor who recommended you go back to get your master's degree. Here you are, this very accomplished woman. You're a professor. You got a PhD. You're a published author. You've done all these amazing things. You've mentored a lot of other people to get their PhD. Who along your journey, who are some of the people that you can point to say, it was these particular individuals who helped me become who I am today, who maybe, encouraged you in your writing or encouraged you in your academic career? Who were some of those teachers, coaches, parents, family members? Who were those people who did that for you? And what role did they play in your life?
Well, the first person I have to mention is my mother. My mother has always been very supportive, always, like I said, whatever I want to do, she's like, hey, I'm right there with you, and I'm going to help you any way I can. As a matter of fact, it used to be funny because when I was in school here as an undergrad, like probably every other weekend or so, I'd go home, and when I got ready to leave, I'd get some sacks and I'd go through the cabinets and pull out, canned goods and food and stuff. I would shop like I was shopping at the grocery store at home. And all up to my room in the dorm. So it was just really, she was really just always there and always supportive of me. And my brother as well. My brother has a MFA, a Master's of Fine Art in Film, and he taught for 25 years at Howard University in film and television. So we both were really pushed and loved education. The other person that really stands out to me is a woman named Portia Maltsby. Portia is a professor from Indiana, and she is retired now. But Portia, I was ready to quit my PhD program at one point. I was having a really difficult time. I decided I wanted to do a degree I wanted to do a dissertation that dealt with pop music and Black kids, because I had worked as a counselor in the Upward Bound program at Houston Tilson College, this historically Black college.
I was at Upward Bound too.
Were you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I worked as a counselor, and it was just really exciting to see. This was the mid-'80s, and rap music was just starting to pop. And it was just exciting to see how they were, kind of incorporating rap music and pop music into their lives. So I decided that's what I want to do for my dissertation. And the director of my graduate program said, well, maybe you should be in a music department then. Because remember, I'm in radio, TV, film. So I'm looking at him like he's crazy. I said, wait a minute. Radio is about music. Television includes music. Film includes music. How are you going to tell me I got to go to a music department to do a dissertation on music when radio, TV, film is all about music? So anyway, he was very adamant about not letting me do this. And so I contacted, I had decided I was going to quit, but I had gotten this stipend to go to a conference in California. It's called ethnomusicology, the study of ethnic music. And so I went to this, and I was going to go free. School was paying for it. So I said, well, I'm going to go to this conference first before I quit. So,
but you went there. You went there with the intent to quit, though.
Yeah, when I got back, I was gonna quit. I was gonna quit the program because I'm like, if I can't do what I want to do, then there's no sense in me being in this program. So I went to that again, serendipity. I met a woman, Portia Maltsby, Dr. Portia Maltsby, and we started talking. And she actually knew this guy in Iowa, Gerard Bayog, who was over the ethnomusicology department. And so we got to talking, and I told her, I said, well, I'm in the PhD program in radio, TV, film, but I'm going to quit because, I don't have to take that from them people. I got a job. I got a life. So she said, well, I want you to hang with me this weekend because she's just an awesome soul. And so I hung with her, and we went everywhere and did all kinds of things. And then at the end of the conference, she said, look, she gave me her number. She said, I don't want you to quit. I want you to go see Gerard Bayog, the guy in ethnomusicology. She says, go see him first before you quit, and let's see if we can't work something out. So I said, okay. So I went and saw him when I got back, and I guess she contacted him and explained what was going on. And he said, well, let me talk to the director over at Art Radio TV Film and see what we can work out. So they decided that the director in Radio TV Film said if I did an additional 18 hours in ethnomusicology, that they would let me do that dissertation. Well, now, I finished my coursework. I'm done. I've done all the hours I'm supposed to do. So he's adding 18 hours to my program.
Wow.
And the funny thing is, I think he thought that was going to hurt me or stop me. I said, okay, because I'm teaching, I got money, I don't have to worry about, I got a place to live. I said, okay, because I was interested by that time. I had gotten interested in ethnomusicology anyway. So I did the 18 hours, and it was so funny because by the time I finished about midway through my 18 hours, we had a new faculty member come in named Jolie Jensen, and Jolie had done her PhD on country western music. And so Jolie became my advisor. And I did my dissertation on pop music and low-income Black adolescents, and a lot of it dealt with rap music, which was popular at the time. And it just all worked out. And the other interesting thing is, by the time I got ready to finish, because I was working full-time at Houston-Tillotson, it took me like 6 years to do my PhD. And the average PhD is about 4 years. It took me 6 years because I was working full-time. But by the time I finished, there were 3 other graduate students in the radio TV program doing dissertations on some element of music. So yes, I opened the way.
You set the trend. Okay. All right. No, that is amazing. I got a couple of more questions to ask you before we wrap up, but I did want to touch on, I know you wanted to talk about something, read off one of your books. You want to touch on a point in the book? Let's do that now.
Yes. Well, I really want to talk about my book on racialism in the media. And the reason why is because this is like based on 25 years of research. I started looking at the different images and messages about African Americans in the media. And what I began to notice is that everything is not racist. Everything is not about racism. That's what I should say. Everything is not about racism. So I started developing this concept called racialism. And the way I defined it was racialism involves racial ideas, images, and issues that are produced, distributed, and consumed repetitively and intertextually. So that means you see them over and over again, and you see them everywhere. So you see the same images and messages in film and television and music. Unfortunately, what I started looking at is how stereotypes, biased frames, and historical myths about African American culture become normalized in this racialized process, particularly through the media. So these media representations then, once they become normal, they begin to shape and influence society based on how they think and how people think and what they see and what they believe. So the interesting thing about this is there's 3 areas: stereotypes, 4 areas actually: stereotypes, bias frames, historical myths, and traditional racism. Those are the images and messages I started looking at in my book on racialism in the media, which was published in 2020 by Peter Lang. And so examples like there's a Kool-Aid ad that has a young boy and a young girl sitting on a stoop, and it's called, the logo is Old School Flavor. And up under the kid's foot is a basketball. Well, now, one of the things this is a stereotype example because there's no reason for there to be a basketball under his foot. He's not even wearing sneakers. He's wearing hush puppies. And he's sitting on a stoop. He's not on a basketball field. But somebody who created this image felt like, oh, we need a basketball to put under his foot. And again, that's a stereotype of Black men and athletics, of course. Then the element of biased framing, which deals with the example that I have is Fox Nation, which when Barack Obama was president, he celebrated his 50th birthday in the White House and he had a barbecue. And the basic headline read, Obama's hip hop barbecue didn't create jobs. So they tied it to hip hop, which of course is a negative when you think about conservatism. And they had 4 Black men, faces of 4 Black men at the beginning of this article. Jay-Z, who is with hip hop, but then they got Chris Rock, Obama, and Charles Barkley. And there's only one hip hop person. So again, kind of an example of bias framing. And finally, historical myths. I use this example of Naomi Campbell, the model Naomi Campbell, and she's racing. They did a whole series, and she's racing a cheetah, and the basic theme is wild things. And again, there's the historical myth deals with how Africa is always considered savage, uncivilized, wild. Black people are compared to apes or monkeys. So that's what the historical myth deals with. And then traditional racism, I used an example of a bumper sticker during President Obama's second run for president, which said, "Don't renege" in 2012, reelect Obama. And we know what renege insinuates, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, traditional racism is more malicious and more offensive, and the intent is more purposeful. Whereas, like I said, stereotypes and historical myths and biased frames, sometimes we just ignore them. Like the average person probably wouldn't even pay attention to the basketball under his foot because they'd see it as normal, as acceptable. And they wouldn't really pay attention to the Fox Nation images where only one of those guys are hip hop artists, but yet they tie the whole thing to hip hop. So again, just understanding that there are certain kinds of images and messages that get perpetuated in the media when it comes to African American culture, some positive, some negative. There's also, I look at some positive kinds of images as well. And I want people to just pay better attention to how stereotypes and bias framing and historical myths impact us.
And my question to you is, what is that impact? Especially if it's not the traditional racism. I mean, you grew up in a time when you were coming from high school to college where it was real racism. Like, you can't go to this school. You can't eat in these restaurants. You can't marry this person. And some people may argue that, well, racism is not a big deal anymore because you can live where you want to live and no one's, going to come and string you up and hang you from a tree and all of these different things. Well, what's your response to that?
Well, but what we have to understand is that racism is tied to how people see us, and that impacts how they feel about us. There are two images that I talk about in my racialism book after Hurricane Katrina, where there's a white man and a white woman wading through the water with bags, and it says they found food. And there's a black man, another article with a black man wading through the water with a bag. It says he looted. It's sometimes it's as simple as that. The black man looted, but the white people found the food. I mean, there was a big controversial ad with H&M where a little black boy was advertising a hoodie, and there's a little black boy, and it said on the front of the hoodie, it said "coolest monkey in the jungle." Again, that's what I'm trying to say. Now, some people would argue that is racist, but I would argue that that's racialism because it's not something that we pay enough attention to. A lot of people probably bought those hoodies that said "coolest monkey in the jungle," and didn't think about the fact that that's pretty negative in relation to Black people when it comes to historical myths. So again, just understanding that even though racism may not be, and sometimes it is still as obvious as it used to be, in some situations it's pretty obvious today, especially after the whole Trump era and the MAGA folks, but it's still there. There are still racial issues that we need to pay attention to that impact how people see us and how they feel about us. And we need to understand that. I'll tell you one other thing that was funny. One of my students, he was a law student, one of my friends, a law student, he's from Chicago, and he was driving back to Chicago, and he said that he went on the highway, he went over to the left lane to pass this white woman who was driving by herself. And, he kind of glanced over at her as he passed her. He said she actually pushed the lockdown on her door. As if
he was going to jump out of a moving car
at 70 miles an hour and somehow jump into her car and get her. It's those kinds of concerns that tend to build because of these images and messages. I mean, the whole idea of the Black man as a criminal, we see that's a stereotype we see everywhere, and we see it all the time. So a Black man walking down the streets of the campus of the University of Iowa could be seen as a criminal and might be seen as a criminal by a number of people, including the police. Well, again, just understanding that these images and messages have a much more powerful impact on society than we understand, and we need to pay attention.
Absolutely. Professor Berry, I want to thank you so much for taking your time out to come and share your story with us today, share the wisdom that you dispelled today. Hopefully one of our viewers today watches this and they get inspired and they see that they too could be a published author. They too could be a professor. They too could get a PhD. You're already, you're all, I typically ask my guests, would they be willing to mentor other people who to help get them where they already are? That's already your mission. That was what started you on this path initially, was to be able to do that and to give back. And so I just want to thank you for that. I appreciate everything that you've done. We're going to include in the link in the bio a link to some of your books, so people can see those books, and all the books that you've mentioned. We'll pop up a picture on the screen so they can see exactly what we're talking about. And next time I'm in Iowa City, I'm gonna look you up and we can grab a bite to eat or grab a cup of coffee. I realize I could pick your brain and we could talk all day long. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show. And I really believe that you've inspired. You've definitely inspired me, and I believe that you'll inspire some of our guests as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll look forward to hearing from you next time you're in the city.
Absolutely. Absolutely.